All right, what's going on, people? We're back again. And listen to this, because something interesting just landed on my radar today. The conversation right now is about Shannon Sharpe possibly wanting his seat back at ESPN, and even Stephen A. Smith has hinted he'd welcome that move. But hold up, we've got to rewind a little and really look at how this whole situation even started. Remember when Shannon stepped away from Undisputed? At the time, people said the tension between him and Skip Bayless was the reason. From what insiders were saying, the executives upstairs ended up siding with Skip when the friction became impossible to ignore. You could literally see the awkward moments playing out on air. Now, Skip later tried to put the blame on the higher-ups, but let's be honest, the tension was visible to everybody watching. And sometimes those behind-the-scenes decisions create even more friction once the cameras start rolling. But here's where the story flips. Listen closely. After leaving Undisputed, Shannon Sharpe didn't slow down at all. In fact, he turned around and arguably became one of the hottest personalities in sports media. His shows Nightcap and Club Shay Shay started taking off in a huge way. And what made it even more interesting was that he didn't just stay inside the sports lane. He showed range, bringing in entertainers, athletes, and viral interviews that kept the internet talking. At the same time, he picked up a role on First Take over at ESPN, and the ratings there reportedly jumped once he joined the conversation. But then, hold up, this is where things got messy. A cell phone video surfaced online that had people talking. In the clip, you could hear a woman making suggestive noises while Shannon Sharpe appeared to be on a bed. When that situation hit the internet, ESPN didn't really turn it into a huge public scandal. They mostly brushed it aside, and Shannon was still appearing on air while the clip circulated. So for a moment, it looked like the situation wasn't going to become a major issue. But then another situation popped up not long after that. A woman named Gabby Zuniga came forward making accusations against Shannon. And if you followed the internet discussions around it, a lot of people believe the whole thing looked like some type of setup or shakedown. The argument many fans made was that selective audio clips were being pushed publicly to control the narrative. And eventually, the situation turned into a payout, which added even more speculation about what really happened behind the scenes. Now here's something else people noticed. Listen to this. If you look at Nightcap, several major sponsors quietly disappeared after the controversy. Brands like Boost Mobile, which previously had visible ad placements, were suddenly gone from the show. Some partnerships were clearly paused or pulled back, but despite all that, Shannon still had strong support from his core audience. And that's the interesting part of the story. Even though the big corporate deals slowed down or went on pause for an unknown amount of time, his fan base didn't really move. People are still tuning in every night to watch Nightcap. The viewership numbers have stayed strong. And on top of that, he's still consistently putting out episodes of Club Shay Shay. So controversy or not, the audience clearly hasn't abandoned Shannon Sharpe. Now, if we're being honest, the guests on Nightcap probably aren't hitting the same level they once did, at least in my opinion. But hold up, the show is still moving numbers, and Shannon Sharpe is still keeping the audience engaged. About a month ago, he was asked directly about possibly returning to ESPN. His response was pretty straightforward. He said he would absolutely consider coming back if they reached out, but he also made it clear the final decision would come down to executives like Burke Magnus, Jimmy Pitaro, and Dave Roberts. At the same time, he pointed out something important. He's still capable of doing the job. The numbers from Nightcap show that people are still tuning in, and according to him, the fan base hasn't gone anywhere. So if the opportunity ever comes back around, he's open to making it happen.
So what Shannon is really saying is simple. If the phone rings and the situation works for both sides, he's willing to return. It wouldn't just be about pride. It would have to make sense professionally, too. The terms would need to benefit both him and the network, because at this stage of his career, leverage matters. Now, here's another piece of the puzzle. In an interview with Front Office Sports, Shannon Sharpe talked about the support he's received from Stephen A. Smith. He said Stephen A. never abandoned him during the controversy. In fact, he mentioned that they probably talk even more now than they did when he was regularly appearing on First Take. According to Shannon, Stephen A. has consistently been in his corner, and in the media world, that kind of support carries weight. And if we're being real, that statement about numbers is also true. ESPN constantly monitors who's pulling attention in the sports media space. They're always watching ratings, engagement, and online buzz. And when it comes to grabbing attention, Shannon Sharpe checks all the boxes. He's exactly the type of personality networks love to have on camera. The only thing is, Nightcap airs at night, so it doesn't directly impact daytime television programming. But listen to this. I honestly think if Shannon had been dominating daytime slots somewhere else, the network might have already tried to bring him back sooner, because competition in daytime sports TV is serious. Now, on his SiriusXM radio show, Stephen A. Smith spoke openly about the situation. He basically said Shannon is his guy, and he still has a lot of love for him. He even admitted he wishes Shannon could come back. But he also kept it real and explained that he doesn't control every decision at ESPN. He said he can make calls on his own radio show and YouTube platform, but the network decisions are much bigger than just him. Still, he described the situation as a work in progress, which tells you something might still be happening behind the scenes. And if you read between the lines, it's obvious Stephen A. Smith would gladly welcome Shannon Sharpe back onto First Take. Before everything blew up, Shannon was appearing regularly up until around April 2025, but that lawsuit situation created a major public relations problem. Add in the earlier cell phone controversy, and suddenly the network didn't want to deal with the negative optics anymore. From a corporate standpoint, they decided it was safer to distance themselves at that moment. During that time, they experimented with other personalities, bringing people like Cam Newton into the mix. But let's be honest, Shannon Sharpe has a unique entertainment factor that many viewers look forward to. And with football season always bringing huge sports conversations, his knowledge of the game adds real value to those debates. Of course, the situation wasn't simple. A lot of information came out publicly, and Shannon eventually paid a settlement to the woman involved. And from a brand perspective, that's the kind of situation companies sometimes want to avoid completely. Networks worry about how those headlines reflect on their brand image. But here's the interesting twist. If Stephen A. Smith had his way, Shannon Sharpe might already be back on First Take. Stephen A. has clearly been advocating for him behind the scenes, and Shannon himself probably understands that daytime television exposure brings a completely different level of visibility. Think about it like this. If ESPN brings him back, it sends a strong signal to advertisers. It basically tells brands that the situation has cooled down and it's safe to work with him again. Because a major network like ESPN always operates with large advertising partners attached. And that's exactly why the network originally pulled back from featuring him. They had to think about the sponsors and the corporate relationships tied to the programming. Protecting those partnerships is always part of the decision-making process. But if Shannon does return, don't be surprised if some of those advertisers slowly start reappearing around him again. It probably wouldn't happen overnight, and it might not reach the same level as before. But once a major platform puts you back in the spotlight, the rebuild process becomes much easier. At the end of the day, numbers usually win in media. If the audience keeps showing up, networks eventually pay attention to that. And right now, Shannon Sharpe is still pulling serious attention. Plus, there's another benefit people sometimes overlook. Working under the umbrella of a major network like ESPN exposes you to opportunities, marketing relationships, and business knowledge you might not get elsewhere. That kind of environment can open doors.
And for someone like Shannon, getting back under that corporate umbrella could speed up the process of reconnecting with major advertisers. It makes you a safer and more familiar face to big brands again. And in the world of sports media, those relationships with major corporations can be just as valuable as the audience itself. And honestly, he probably needs that kind of backing right now. Because when you really look at how podcasts make serious money, it's not just about YouTube views. The ad deals and brand partnerships are where the real bag comes in. And at one point, Shannon Sharpe was landing major deals left and right. It felt like everything he touched was turning into a win. He was basically on a streak where he couldn't miss. But let's keep it real. This whole situation definitely slowed that momentum down. Still, the key thing is his audience hasn't disappeared. The real question now is how sponsors and corporate partners view his image going forward. That's really the bigger picture here, because fans may stay loyal, but brand perception can determine the size of those deals.
And in media, perception can shift opportunities fast. So, moving forward, it'll be interesting to see how things play out for Shannon Sharpe. But that's where I'll leave it for now. Let me know what you think about this whole situation in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. And until next time, peace.